Now we're going to be talking about the proxy design pattern. And the proxy design pattern lets you work with remote objects in a way that lets them appear to be local objects. For example, say you have some of your code and you want to work with the automat object that we've created when we were discussing the state design pattern, previous set of movies. And there's the automat, and we want to work with the automat in client code, in your own code, and yet the automat object is a remote object for you. It's someplace else, and so you have to connect to it, and you can work with an automat proxy. This proxy exposes the same methods as the automat itself does, but in fact the automat itself is in some remote location, and when you call a method on the automat proxy, what actually happens is that method is sent to the automat server, which will then execute the method and send you back a response. So the automat proxy is a stand-in for the actual automat. So that's what this design pattern says. You can use stand-ins for actual remote objects and call methods on that stand-in, on that proxy, and have the methods executed just as though they were being executed on the object itself. So that's the proxy design pattern. We're going to see how to work with a proxy coming up. We're going to actually create a automat object and then let our client code work with it as an automat proxy, and it's actually going to be a remote object. We're going to have to connect with it remotely, and you'll see how that's done with servers and clients coming up next. And we're going to then create an automat proxy, and our client code will be able to call all kinds of methods on the automat proxy, and just like the methods we were able to use on the automat when we designed it in the state design pattern. And that proxy will then, behind the scenes, communicate with the server and execute the actual calls to the various methods there on the server, and then get the response back and interface, send that response back to the client code, just as though you were actually dealing with an automat here. In fact, you're actually dealing with a proxy automat. And the proxy is just a stand-in for the actual automat, and behind the scenes it connects to the automat, and we're going to see how that works using Java client server code coming up next when we first start working on creating the automat proxy and putting the proxy design pattern to use.